completed the introduction, let's go through the SAP Finance evolution. SAP Finance has kept some modules and capability relatively unchanged for the last 20 years. So in a lot of cases, things have just not changed much at all. And when we talk about the new GL or new general ledger, it's actually now 13 years old, so it's really not so new anymore, although we still refer to it as the new GL. But really, the acceleration of the change has really been in the last 3 to 4 years. There's been a significant change in the structure of SAP as things have moved forward. So, depending on your experience with SAP, the original general ledger is known as the classic general ledger. New GL was the next iteration, which we say new, but it's now 13 years old. And today we are now at the stage where we have now got the universal journal. In terms of universal journal and in the latest SAP conferences, etc., over the last probably 2-3 years, the word simple finance was used a lot to describe the latest SAP functions and capability. Simple finance is no longer used as an SAP marketing term, and the product is now called S4 HANA Finance. So if you kind of fast forward today, everything is called S4 HANA Finance. So if you hear simple finance, this often refers to the new HANA capabilities, but we're now calling it S4 HANA Finance according to SAP. Also, in terms of the versions, if we think about the on-premise versus cloud, I'm not going to go through all the version details, but in terms of on-premise, the versions update annually, and they have this naming convention now, which is the year and the month. So often if you hear about S4 HANA Finance 1610, all that really means is that it's in 2016 October, or the 10th month is when this version was released. The latest, as of recording this course, is 1709, so it's S4 HANA Finance 1709, which is September 2017. Now the versions here refer to S4 itself. I'm just using finance because it's part of this course. So just for your own understanding nowadays, anything that's S4, you'll see a version number and that denotes the year. So it'll give you an idea of the evolution. And let's go through that now in more detail. So in terms of timelines, 1992 is when SAP R3 actually came out, and this is when Classic GL was around, and you could really run this on any database. Then if we go ahead to 2004 is when SAP started using the terminology ECC, or Enterprise Central Component, and this replaced the use of the words R3. And when SAP ECC came out, you could choose New GL or Classic GL. So for any customers who only started the SAP journey or installed Greenfield with SAP ECC, you most likely started with New GL and never really knew anything about the Classic GL. For customers who had SAP before 2004, you were probably on Classic GL, and then it was a choice to migrate to New GL or not. And there you heard a lot of these migration projects to go from Classic to New GL. So depending on how your company approached it, you might be on Classic or New GL at this point. And again, this ran on any database. So the big change was around about 2014. SAP started to use the term simple finance. And when this first came out, this was an add-on, and it was called, version 1, an add-on to SAP ECC. And at this stage, the concept of the FI+CO logical document was introduced. At this stage, you needed to be using the new GL, and you needed to have the HANA database installed in order to take advantage of this new logical document. So simple finance introduced the FI+CO logical document, and we'll go into this in more detail, which essentially had a way to bring together FI and CO into one logical document as opposed to a physical document on HANA database. Then in 2015, this is where the changes really also accelerated. It was still called Simple Finance, but it was now called Simple Finance 2.0, and this is when the Universal Journal was originally born. And the difference really here was that besides many other technical differences, this logical document now became really a new physical table in SAP called the Universal Journal, and we'll go into those details. And if we fast forward through 2015, 2016, this is when S4 HANA Finance or the S4 HANA got released. The main difference is that when S4 got released, it wasn't only finance, you could also have logistics as well, which was your traditional SD components, but for the context of this course, we're discussing finance itself. And as mentioned previously, the current version is 1709 or 2017, and Universal Journal on HANA is what we are really using in the finance space. So I'm going to go through this in more detail, but I thought it was interesting to be able to see the journey and to understand how things have changed, how we got from Classic through new GL, the first introduction of Universal Journal, and then where we are today. So let's go through these in more detail now. So first, if we look at the classic general ledger, so this is really where you had the general ledger and you had sub-modules, but the core architecture here was really data silos. So reporting was always separated by module. So if we take the FI space, you kind of had this, I've just carved this out into a pie chart to give you an idea. You sort of had the core general ledger and special purpose ledger, and then you had other sub-modules in finance or FIs, like things like AP and AR and fixed assets. And then you really had the CO modules. So there was a clear delineation between FI and CO. And in CO, the main modules were cost center accounting, internal orders, and profitability analysis. And then you had other capabilities in CO, like profit center accounting, product cost controlling, and material ledger. But the main construct here was there were separate reporting modules. So if you wanted to run material ledger or profit center accounting or cost center accounting, assets or GL, you had to go to those specific modules to run specific reports. So the data, although it was integrated, wasn't really well shared between the various modules. So this is the state of play with the classic general ledger. So let's have a look to see how things then changed. If we now go to ECC or new general ledger, the main capabilities introduced were that of parallel ledgers, and also profit center and segment were added to FI. These were really the core differences. So in the FI area here, in this segment of the pie, we now added in profit center accounting. We took it away from CO and now brought it up to FI. Segment was introduced and parallel ledgers. So this really gave a lot of new capability here in FI and took some away from CO. And this was really to drive the importance of segment reporting, and the whole concept of parallel ledgers was introduced to give you more capabilities for US GAAP versus local statutory reporting requirements in various other countries, and was a new capability. So that's really, when we say new GL, this is really what we mean about how CO was starting to get promoted into FI. So let's now go ahead to the Simple Finance add-on 1.0, the first version that was introduced. So new GL was originally part of the scenario. No change in functionality occurred here, but this logical document was introduced on HANA. And when this was also done, by having this logical document, the main FI and CO totals and index tables were removed. And I'll go through that in more detail later, but essentially it meant you didn't need to have GL totals and GL line items in order to do your reporting, because this logical document on the HANA database enabled you to do that. So in terms of our pie chart and our diagram, these elements of the pie remained the same, but this new piece here was introduced on HANA, and FI and CO were combined into a logical document, not a physical document. And the reporting on here on HANA was done on something called CDS views, which enabled you to report on this logical document structure. Now this isn't a technical course on HANA database, but just in general for your understanding, when you hear somebody talk about a CDS view, its real name is Core Data Services, but it's really a HANA data model that's used to drive analytical reporting in layman's terms. And this is the successor to what was previously called the virtual data models. But in your mind, as a finance user, a CDS view really is a virtual data model of the table that you're reporting on. So it doesn't have to physically exist, but the system can generate it from the database. So when Simple Finance first came out, to summarize, the logical document was introduced to FI and CO. So this really, a lot of early adopters in HANA Finance, Simple Finance would have seen this, but for many users, they might not have gone this route yet if you hadn't adopted early. So let's see where we are today. So today we talk about the Universal Journal as part of S4. And the key concept here is that there's one table for all FI and CO line item details. So the logical document now disappeared, and it now became a new table called ACDOCA. So this really stands for Accounting Document Actuals. That's really how SAP came up with it, Accounting Document Actuals. And this table contains all FI/CO details, and the main benefit here is that FI and CO are permanently reconciled because they are in the same table. This was a key breakthrough. So if we think about our pie chart here, in terms of FI/CO, Under new GL, we already had profit and accounting and segment and parallel ledger concepts in here, but now with the Universal Journal, AP, AR, and assets all became part of FI as well, so FI and CO really get combined. Cost center accounting, internal orders, material ledger, and account-based profitability analysis are now all part of this new FI+CO model in the ACDOCA table. So CO does still exist, and there is capability there, like product costing as an example, and costing-based profitability analysis. But it's not that those capabilities are gone, but for the key scenarios and account-based PA, these are all now part of this ACDOCA table. So you no longer have to try and reconcile between FI and CO. This Universal Journal was introduced from SAP Finance 2.0, and it was the base for S4 HANA Finance. And reporting now can really come from Fiori apps or those HANA CDS views I mentioned in the previous slide. So Fiori apps are the new SAP user experience. So you'll have an app for a financial statement report or an app for a transaction. And some of these apps are really just packages of CDS views. So you don't have to get too hung up in the terminology, but just to understand the concept that the Fiori apps really came in as part of SAP Finance 2.0, now called S4 HANA Finance. So key concept, one new table called Universal Journal, all this FI+CO capability brought together, so you don't have to do this reconciliation anymore, because product costing, if you think about it, is a capability module. It's not really, you can run, it doesn't affect your financial statements directly, and costing-based PA, because it's not account-based, was also kept separate at this point. So that's really how we got to the Universal Journal itself. So let's go through a few more details. So this slide here is an SAP slide of the Universal Journal, and just to give you another view versus the pie chart view I just displayed. Again, SAP are saying the Universal Journal, or this ACDOCA table, is this kind of central, really wide, really big journal with all the details. And what the slide is trying to depict is that the general ledger, COPA, traditional CO, cost and accounting, internal orders, assets, material ledger, all now part of the central table. And again, the main benefits: one line item table with everything in it, no reconciliation required. And they are the database benefits, like reduced memory, very fast reporting, and we'll go through those details. So this is really a view of why the Universal Journal is so important and its impact from the previous SAP modules. So it becomes your new single source of truth. So to go through that again, classic GL, FI and CO were in data silos. We got a new GL where we introduced multiple ledgers, profit center and segment, and functional area were even part of these GL totals records. Simple Finance 1.0 was the first step to bringing FI and CO together in that logical document, and here we eliminated some totals and index tables. Then we got to Simple Finance 2.0. This was version 1503, just in case you see any of this in documentation. But then we quickly moved on to S4 HANA Finance, which is the new name instead of calling it Simple Finance. These versions, you'll typically see numbers like 1511, 1605, 1610, and remember 15, 16, 17 here. This denotes the year of the release. And Universal Journal table, ACDOCA, accounting document actuals. And this unified FI and CO on HANA. And then we eliminated more totals and index and CO tables, and we'll go through those details. So this is really the big evolution and why Universal Journal is so important. And if you've been a previous user of SAP and you are familiar with the concept of FI and CO being in separate worlds and had to wait for BW to bring them together, this is it done straight up for you with the greatest version. So it's really a big improvement. Now, when we talk about HANA, I'm not going to go into a lot of details about HANA database technically, but just as a general user, it's worthwhile to understand that SAP R3 and ECC ran on any database, whether it was SQL Server, Oracle, DB2, etc. These were relational databases and were based on disk storage, physical disk. And totals and index tables, which are the terminology I mentioned, these were there for performance in a relational database. An index helps speed up searching. Totals were that you could start at a total before going to the line items. And when you're familiar with your SAP transactions, you always generally started with a total and before you went to line items. And OLTP and OLAP were always separated in the previous world. And this is transaction processing and analytical processing. When HANA got introduced, just as a quick layman's terms, HANA is really an in-memory database, and it's a column store database. And This type of database in memory means it uses RAM memory and not disk storage, and this is why it's super fast, and it uses a much smaller data footprint by using column store. Those are just some concepts that are worth having for background. S/4HANA only runs on the HANA database. This is a key difference. It allows very fast access to real-time data, big data, and for processing, reporting, and analytics. As I mentioned, transaction processing and analytical processing are now combined. So what this really means is you no longer need a separate BW system for reporting. BW doesn't go away, but for many scenarios you don't need to wait for BW in order to do these two different functions. You also get a higher throughput for operational processes. So really what this means is that period end closing, settlement, allocations, those types of processes will also run much faster in this HANA in-memory database. And when you need financial totals or aggregates in COPA, they are calculated on the fly. In other words, as the report runs, it will calculate the totals and aggregates. They don't need to be explicitly stored in a table to be available to the system. So that's just a real quick couple of minutes on HANA to give you a bit of background knowledge. So before we jump into the system itself, just a quick pictorial to remind you of the evolution again. R3, classic GL, any database, 92. Going forward in the 2000s, SAP ECC, you could choose classic or new GL. If you were a new installation, you'd probably start a new GL. If your company already had SAP, you might be stuck on classic on any database. Then for many years, as you can see, things didn't change, but 2014 stepped on the gas. Simple Finance got introduced, FI+CO logical document, and this was on HANA, and you had to use new GL. But then rapidly in 2015, Simple Finance 2.0 came out, the Universal Journal, that one new table, ACDOCA, and that was the base for S/4HANA, which we're at now, called S/4HANA Finance, no longer Simple Finance. Versions 1709 is the current one, 2017, Universal Journal. So hopefully that gives you an idea of the evolution. So when you hear consultants or you're reading documents mentioning a bunch of buzzwords, I'm hoping this will give you some hooks that you can understand, and follow the conversation. Okay, so with that said, we're going to now head on to jumping into more detail.